One of the biggest mistakes greenhouse buyers make is feeling like they need every single feature right away. Many of the upgrades that you hear and see and are advertised and can feel overwhelmed by, a lot of them can actually wait. You don't have to have all that stuff right away. When we first started, we only had the building. It was a big first step, and we were thrilled to do that because it's a big investment to have a building. And so when we covered our crop, we were thrilled. And we didn't have all the other bells and whistles, all the other add-ons. And as I mentioned in other videos, we learned from our mistakes, and I am trying to save you on some of that time and learning curve. But we didn't have everything right away, and we did survive. We just had to scramble a bit more sometimes. So I mentioned, I had another video that talks about things that you really don't want to skip. Like, these are things that you should at least think about. Doesn't mean you have to buy them. You just need to have a plan. However, this one I want to talk more about what you don't have to have, so you can give that some thought. As failure comes on board, you've learned to figure things out and to fix them quickly. We did add things every year, or every season, I should say, as we could afford them and as we learned what they would do for us. And each thing we did add, we would do to save us some time, and it would improve our crop every time. Adding different accessories can definitely help, but it could also be really overwhelming. And you don't have to have all that stuff. Sometimes it can be too much to think about trying to figure out how all these things work, how to set them up, how they apply to your crop. There's some really complicated add-ons that maybe do great things, but sometimes basic is fine too. So this video is more focusing on what you don't have to have right out of the gate. So one of the first things to think about is automation. Automation can be really helpful. It's a really nice feature. However, it's not required. And manual systems work extremely well when you start out. That is how we started out. A lot of times when you go to scale and your labor demands increase, you got to think about your timing when you're thinking about whether or not you want to invest in automation. If you are someone who has the time to put more into your crop, farming, a lot of it's a labor of love, and it is time consuming. So if you have that time, that's something that maybe where you could cut cost, is putting your time into something versus automation. You don't have to have automated waters and that kind of stuff right out of the gate. For our irrigation, as I said, we did a lot of self-watering. We also did drip tape. We would just lay the drip tape out, and it had little tiny holes. And so we turned a knob and had to hook it up, but it wasn't automated like on timers necessarily. And you can do that. And even adding a timer might be a very simple step, but again, maybe somewhere between hand watering and a fully automated comes on with an app on your phone. There's a lot of areas in between. Another thing to consider, I've mentioned before, you shouldn't just ignore the idea of heat. Different climates are going to require different heating elements and different amounts of heat. That combined with what you're growing. So if you're growing in a really cold area, you're growing in Maine, and you want to grow tropical fruit in the wintertime, heat is incredibly important. You probably are going to have to invest in some serious systems to keep that heated and keep it to the level you want. But if you're growing a colder weather crop, if you are just extending your season, you may not need heat at all. You may be able to go without adding heat at all. And I have customers who do that. So consider what you're growing and what your investment is going to be. There are also a lot of other options when it comes to heating, but you should consider the time that is also going to go into that. As I've mentioned, a lot of times I feel like as farmers, we don't consider it, and our time is not something that we calculate. And that's okay. A lot of times a lot of us are okay with that for a while, but eventually think about what it's going to lead to. And if you're okay with doing that and for how long. For example, we started out heating with wood stove in our greenhouse, and it worked really well, and it was less expensive than the bigger propane systems. However, it also meant that stove had to be loaded every 4 hours. So someone was up all night long in the really cold seasons loading the stove every 4 hours, and that would be my wonderful husband. He did that. But in any case, the crop survived and it worked. But when we moved on to something more automated, it was really nice. And so that's something that we, again, though, added on, and we did not start out with. And so you do not need to start out with it. I think I mentioned in another video too, you can also make areas that are going to be warmer, and that can save you on that heat and how you plan for heat. So again, that's kind of a different video, so I don't want to overlap it, but I just want to mention that heating is not something that has to be a huge investment and is often sold as you have to have some giant system. And it just depends, again, on what you're doing and where you're located. So keep that in mind. A lot of accessories that you'll see out there are going to add cost, of course, and they're really complicated. And they don't necessarily improve your plant health on the overall. I always refer to the bang for your buck because I always want to think about, what am I adding? How much is it costing me to add this? And what am I going to get out of it? And certain systems, you add certain elements and certain systems, and wow, it's amazing. It saves you time and it can really make your crop thrive. But some things just really don't. That was not my route, or our route, I should say. So, you got to remember your time is worth something. So the balance is important. Thinking about, how much time do I need to put into this item to learn how to use it properly? And will it be enough help? And then how much expense is that? And does that make sense for me? Will it save me enough time that it makes sense for me too? So things to keep in mind. So remember that not every accessory is required. Some are helpful, but it's important to weigh the pros and cons on what things you need in your greenhouse, what makes sense for you for your time, and then delve a little further into, and we'll have videos coming up on what kind of heat makes the most sense for you and your season, what you're growing, your environment, that kind of thing. What kind of ventilation do you need? I hope this helped you kind of figure out maybe that you don't have to have every item right away. If it did and you found it helpful, please like or subscribe and consider checking us out for future videos. Thanks.